A lot of big news as it relates to Deep State Gate as we continue to literally unpeel layer by layer of this onion. One big issue that came up today, the media was breathlessly reporting all day that the first Russiagate desperado to get convicted as part of Mueller's fishing expedition has now been sentenced in court. It's this guy, what's his name? Alex van der Zwaan. His sentence was handed down. Reporters, I guess they must have thought it was going to be 10, 20, 30 years in jail. After all, this was the first punishment ever announced as part of the investigation into Russia's supposed hijacking of the presidential election. Anyway, so, well, what did he get? What was the sentence? A big fat 30 days in jail. I've seen longer sentences for people that have speeding tickets and drunk driving. And we have other developments that we are following today. One has to do with the U.S. Department of Justice naming an experienced former federal prosecutor. This is back in, when was this? This was back in 2014, all right? Federal prosecutor oversee counter-espionage efforts, part of the broader restructuring of the National Security Prosecution Team with cyber attacks and the threat of sensitive technology ending up in the wrong hands. This is around the time that Devin Nunes was warning and writing in the Washington Times and warning then President Obama that the Russians actually wanted to influence the 2016 elections. And, of course, he scoffed at the idea, and he did absolutely nothing in the end. But the point is, David Laughlin is an important name that we now have to understand and remember here because, well, Sara Carter is here to explain why. Sara Carter has a new column out today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Sean. Thank you so much. Yeah, David Laughlin is an important name because he was basically the guy at the DOJ that was really in charge of the investigations, and had a lot of say. He was also very close to Sally Yates, who was fired by President Trump when she refused to basically adhere to his immigration policy at the time. Laughlin actually left the DOJ in March. He was a long time served with the department.
When you say left, he left this past March and nobody knew about it.
Correct. Yeah, nobody really knew about it. It was really kind of quiet. He kind of walked off into the night, but he was mentioned often, and according to congressional sources that I've spoken with, in text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, some of which have already been revealed, and some of which are in my story. And I don't think a lot of people paid a lot of attention to what was going on with Laughlin and what was going on with the FBI, particularly when they had no exposure to these text messages. And now we see that there was actually conflict, and they were after each other, the FBI and the DOJ, on trying to get these FISA warrants, particularly the FISA warrant on Carter Page in October, which eventually they got in October 19th, 2016. But before that, there was a lot of push and pull between the FBI, and the FBI was really strong-arming people within the DOJ.
In other words, we have new communications that were discovered by congressional investigators show that the FBI was improperly coordinating with the Department of Justice officials in an effort to pressure those officials to expedite the foreign intelligence surveillance warrant against the Trump associate Carter Page. And the House Oversight Government Reform Committee, these text messages between Strzok and Page once again, were discussing the FBI's difficulty in getting that warrant to spy on Page. Explain how that dovetails into Laughlin.
Well, so Laughlin then text messages, back and forth. And I guess discusses this, not text messages, but discusses this with Peter Strzok. And Peter Strzok then text messages Lisa Page and tells him, hey, look, I've been dealing with Laughlin on this. He's really aggravating me. That was in March, and then in September he text messages her again and says, I'm hearing from Laughlin that they're not happy with how we've handled this, and they're kind of holding this off. The Eastern District of New York is holding this off. They were actually part of the Justice Department's group that was handling these warrants. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, what you get is somebody else from the Justice Department who is involved in this goes to actually goes to the White House, visits the White House, and that was several days after these text messages are back and forth, these exchanges between the two FBI agents, and visits with President Obama. And then less than a month later, you get the FISA warrants on Carter Page. And the question here is, how much did President Obama know? How much did people in the White House know about this investigation? And more importantly, Sean, how involved were they in this investigation?
All right, I want to slow it down again just for clarity here. So these new communications, so here you have this guy Laughlin, then you've got the lovebirds, Page and Strzok, are texting each other. I'm getting aggravated at Laughlin, a 2016 message from Strzok to Page says, and congressional investigators are pointing out that this new communication suggests that the conflict gets deeper in the following months because now we're getting close to election time. And then in September of 2016, Lisa Page is saying, just make sure I understand where things are, redacted, trying to walk Axelrod, Matthew Axelrod, a DOJ prosecutor, and this is where the DOJ and the FBI are coordinating, if you will, because he's so angry with how this came over to them. And I told her not to put herself out too much. If Matt wants to call and yell at Andy, meaning Andrew McCabe, who she's supposed to be the attorney for, that's fine. And Axelrod was the former top deputy to then acting Attorney General Yates. So when you put it all together, take it from there.
When you put it all together, you see how they were coordinating amongst each other, according to congressional officials who are looking at this evidence. I mean, and remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more here that they haven't been able to see. So a lot of this has been a real big struggle for congressional investigators on all the committees, both the House Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, and others like Representative Goodlatte, who are now forcing the hand of the FBI to turn over the documents. So what we're seeing here is basically on the surface a coordination, and you're 100% right. You know, when they reference Andy, they're referencing, former FBI Director Andrew McCabe and all of the consequential and incidental things that he was involved in during this investigation. Let's go back to Matthew Axelrod because he's very important. I mean, he was the top deputy at that point in time to acting Attorney General Sally Yates as well. So we see, you have David Laufman, who is significantly involved, has a very high level security clearance, is in charge of the Hillary Clinton investigation, as well as the Russia investigation into the 2016 election, Russia's involvement or non-involvement, depending on how you look at it, into the 2016 election, and mainly Trump. And then you have Matthew Axelrod, who's there, again, a top deputy to acting director Sally Yates, so they're all connected. And now you have all these people connected to the highest levels of the FBI in the investigation into Russia. And then all of these people are also connected, based on the evidence that we see now, based on the documentation that we see now, early on in the investigation with the White House, the FBI, and the CIA.
So what about Laufman stepping down in all of this? How do you interpret that?
Well, that's really interesting because they never revealed, Sean, the reason why. It was basically for personal reasons, for family reasons, and he just kind of walked away from it. Now, I've talked to sources who have said as things started getting heated, as his name became more apparent, and I believe he also has been interviewed by the Inspector General, that he decided himself to walk away before things got too hot and heavy, and he decided to just move out. Because this is a man that has spent and dedicated his life to the law. I mean, he was a top-notch prosecutor. He dealt with national security issues. And obviously his involvement in this is very concerning to some. I've spoken to people who have said that, David Laufman is kind of the missing link in all of this. I've spoken to others who said, look, Laufman, I don't think would ever violate the law or leak. But as we've seen from the evidence that has appeared both with the House Intelligence Committee and the other committees investigating this, we've seen a number of people that I don't think people expected to find information on who were actually leaking or who were coordinating, one of them being James Clapper.
But the thing is, he worked on the Clinton-Russia investigation.
Absolutely. He was heavily involved in the Clinton-Russia investigation. He was also heavily involved, like I said, in the Internet when they were actually investigating Hillary Clinton for her use of a private email server.
What do you make of this measly 30 days in jail for Alex von der Zwaan?
I think that's really, I think you were right when you said that there were people expecting this big jail sentence or expecting some kind of major revelation. It's like a slap on the wrist. I mean, what you can see right here is that the special counsel is trying to collect notches once again for one count of lying, right? It was the same thing they did to Flynn, the same thing they did to George Papadopoulos. It's the same reason we're hearing from attorneys and other people who are saying, please don't let President Trump speak to Mueller or the special counsel's office, because what they're looking for is just anything that they can get him to entrap him in or corner him in, which is what we've seen with all of these other cases. I was speaking to a source who at the time was very close to Flynn and said to me, I was asking whether or not, would Flynn's attorney be willing to withdraw that guilty plea? Do we know anything? Are we hearing anything? A lot of people that were close to Flynn would hope that his attorney would do that, or maybe there's some new strategy in place, with all of this evidence coming out. One of the things they did say, with all of the revelations about McCabe, particularly the fact that we know now that he lied 4 times to the investigators and the inspector general that were conducting this investigation, everything that he's touched is kind of like fruit from the poisonous tree.
Yeah.
How are they going to handle that?
I got to take a break. We'll come back. I want to ask you about Andrew McCabe's wife and her op-ed that she wrote in the Washington Post. We'll get to that. Well, more with Sara Carter. All right, as we continue, investigative reporter Sara Carter is with us. All right, so the wife of the former deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe, has taken to the op-ed page of the Washington Post, and the president attacked my reputation. It's time to now set the record straight. Now, her husband was in a position that he had to do all sorts of things that were involved in politics. And I've read it closely, and I know she's outraged and that the president's talked about it, but she did get $700,000 in money raised for a Senate campaign in the state of Virginia by the Clintons' best friend, and that guy's name is Terry McAuliffe. Her husband did work for the FBI. Now, she's claiming that, the investigations into the Clinton email server scandal were later. I'm not so sure I buy it. What are your thoughts?
No, I don't. And I mean, I understand that, as a wife, she's probably outraged. She probably does feel like her life has been turned upside down where, nobody wants to take that away from her. Those are her feelings. But her op-ed is patently false on its face, if you look at it. She said that there was, that these presidential tweets and the twisted reporting based on the fact that she ran for office, was the reason that her husband lost his job. And a significant portion of their
Her husband lied under oath, as I understand it, 4 separate times when he was being investigated.
Absolutely, and that's the reason that he lost his job. And if you're talking about collusion or that there's some type of, she's claiming that the president went after them, and went after her husband, and that other people are going after her husband. No, just look at what happened during this alleged investigation into Trump collusion with Russia. I mean, if anything, what we've seen is insurmountable evidence. I mean, Sean, insurmountable evidence that there were people within the Obama administration colluding with the FBI, with others, in order to kind of corner President Trump. We saw with the Hillary Clinton investigation that there was no real investigation. I mean, even when she was interviewed, she didn't have to take oath. They didn't have transcription of Hillary Clinton's interview. They had
long written her exoneration, and just 2 days after the so-called interview, it ends up that Strzok, who did the interview along with one other FBI agent, that Strzok with Page hated the president, but also were working in conjunction with Andrew McCabe.
And the same issue rose with Andrew McCabe. Remember, there was a lot of concern among sources that I spoke with in the FBI, both former and current sources within the FBI, that Andrew McCabe was making the same type of disparaging comments, before and after the election, and that there was a lot of internal bias inside the FBI. So even the foundation, and now that we see all the evidence pouring out, regarding the dossier, that even Christopher Steele, the former ex-British spy, admitted that he didn't verify anything in the dossier.
We're going to have more on this tonight. An amazing column by Sara Carter. Her website, SaraACarter.com, and we link it to Hannity.com. We'll have a lot more on that.